Picture a crowded marketplace just before dawn. Lantern light flickers against stone walls. Merchants whisper prices. Coins pass from hand to hand. Everyone is trading, but not everyone is sleeping peacefully. Because beneath the noise of commerce, beneath the hum of prosperity, something invisible is forming. A question, a tension, a quiet unease. What happens when a society becomes wealthy, but forgets how to be honest? What happens when money grows faster than character? Nearly 1,000 years ago, a Muslim scholar living in the heart of a thriving civilization looked at the economic world around him and saw danger long before collapse appeared on the surface. He didn't speak in spreadsheets. He didn't draw charts. He spoke in moral language, and his warning was simple. When money loses its moral anchor, civilizations begin to decay from the inside. Not slowly, not gently, but inevitably. This video is AI, generated for educational purposes only. It is not financial advice. Do your own research and consult qualified professionals before making decisions. Today, we explore the life and ideas of Imam Abu Hamid Al-Ghazali, a thinker who refused to separate wealth from responsibility, economics from ethics, and markets from the human soul. And what he saw in the 11th century feels uncomfortably familiar in the 21st. To understand why, you have to step into his world. The year is roughly 1100 CE. Europe is still recovering from centuries of political fragmentation and economic stagnation. Many regions rely heavily on subsistence agriculture. Urban life is limited. Trade exists, but on a smaller scale. Meanwhile, across the Islamic world, a very different picture is unfolding. Cities like Baghdad, Damascus, Cairo, Nishapur, and Cordoba are alive with activity. Libraries overflow with books. Scholars debate philosophy, mathematics, medicine, law, and theology. Caravans move across continents carrying spices, silk, precious metals, paper, and ideas. This is one of the most interconnected commercial networks the world has ever seen, and with that connectivity comes wealth. A lot of wealth. New merchant classes rise. Large fortunes accumulate. Luxury goods circulate. Palaces grow larger. Markets grow busier. From the outside, it looks like success. From the inside, Al-Ghazali sees cracks forming. He is born in 1058 in what is today northeastern Iran. He studies law, theology, philosophy, and logic. His brilliance becomes obvious early. By his 30s, he is appointed to one of the most prestigious teaching positions in the Muslim world. Power, prestige. Students from across regions seek him out. But instead of becoming comfortable, Al-Ghazali becomes uneasy. He looks at society and senses a contradiction. Outward prosperity is rising. Inner integrity is weakening. People speak about faith, but chase status. They speak about justice, but manipulate contracts. They speak about piety, but measure success almost entirely in coins. This tension drives much of his writing, and one of the most radical things he does is treat money not as a neutral object, but as a moral force. Not good, not evil, but dangerous when misunderstood. In Al-Ghazali's view, money has a very specific purpose. It exists to make exchange easier, that's it. Money is a bridge, a translator between needs. One person grows wheat, another weaves cloth, another builds homes. Instead of bartering endlessly, money allows all of them to cooperate. So money itself is not the goal, it is the tool. He compares money to something with no independent worth, like a piece of glass that reflects images. The glass isn't valuable because it is glass. It's valuable because of what it shows. Money works the same way. Its importance comes from what it enables people to produce, trade, and build. When people forget this, problems begin. Because the tool quietly becomes the idol. Instead of using money, people start serving it. Instead of asking, what does this wealth allow me to contribute? They ask, how much more can I accumulate? And that shift, Al-Ghazali argues, poisons society. One of his most striking ideas is that idle wealth harms the entire community. When money is locked away, hidden, buried, or stored only for ego, it stops flowing. And when money stops moving, economic life slows. Workers lose jobs. Merchants sell less. Trade weakens. Families struggle, not because resources vanished, but because circulation froze. He doesn't describe hoarding as merely selfish. He describes it as socially destructive, like blocking an artery in the body. The heart may still beat, but the limbs begin to fail. And here's what makes his thinking sophisticated. He doesn't blame only individuals. He looks at systems. If a society rewards hoarding, if it celebrates accumulation without contribution, if it glorifies wealth regardless of how it was earned, then people will naturally chase hoarding, not because they are uniquely evil, but because incentives shape behavior. This insight feels modern, yet Al-Ghazali was writing it centuries before economics became a formal discipline. Another area where his thinking feels shockingly current is speculation. He observes merchants who deliberately withhold goods to create artificial shortages. He sees traders spreading rumors to drive prices up or down. He watches people buying not because they need something, but because they hope someone else will pay more later. To him, this is not entrepreneurship. It is exploitation. Not all buying and selling is equal. Trade that brings real goods and services to people is beneficial. Trade that simply extracts money without adding value corrodes trust. And trust, in his worldview, is the foundation of all markets. Once trust collapses, contracts become meaningless, prices become suspicious, weights and measures become unreliable. Every transaction turns into a small battle. An economy like that may look active, but internally, it is rotting. He makes a powerful psychological observation. When people see others getting rich through manipulation, they feel foolish for being honest. So they imitate the dishonesty. Corruption spreads, not because everyone wants to be corrupt, but because no one wants to be the only one left behind. This is how moral collapse becomes normalized. Slowly, quietly, socially. Al-Ghazali is not against profit. That's important. He does not advocate poverty for everyone. He does not condemn merchants simply for being wealthy. He recognizes that trade feeds cities. He recognizes that business creates livelihoods. He recognizes that prosperity, when earned ethically, can strengthen society. His line is drawn at deception, false weights, concealing defects, lying about quality, breaking promises, manipulating information. From his perspective, these acts are not minor sins. They are attacks on the economic ecosystem itself. Because once lying becomes acceptable in commerce, nothing else remains stable. Another core idea in his thinking is the dignity of labor. Work, he argues, shapes the soul. Earning through effort builds patience, discipline, and responsibility. Gaining wealth without effort, through manipulation, fraud, or pure extraction, weakens character. Not only spiritually, but socially. A society filled with contributors grows resilient. A society filled with extractors becomes fragile. This distinction matters, because Al-Ghazali is not romanticizing struggle. He is not glorifying hardship. He is saying that meaningful contribution is what anchors people psychologically. When people feel they are useful, they protect the system. When people feel they are merely gaming the system, they have no loyalty to it. And a system without loyalty collapses easily. His critique also extends to rulers. Medieval states, like modern ones, constantly search for ways to finance themselves. Wars, palaces, administrations, infrastructure. Sometimes rulers raise taxes openly. Other times, they quietly reduce the precious metal content of coins. To the average person, the coin looked the same, but it bought less. Al-Ghazali condemns this practice strongly, not as a technical error, but as moral theft. Because it disguises taxation, it erodes purchasing power silently. It punishes those with fixed incomes the most, and it destroys confidence in the currency. He argues that rulers exist to safeguard fairness, not undermine it. When leaders manipulate money for short-term relief, they plant long-term instability. People eventually notice, trust fades, merchants raise prices to compensate, foreign currencies start circulating, barter reappears, the monetary system weakens. None of this happens overnight, which is precisely why it is dangerous. Al-Ghazali understands something many overlook. Economic collapse is rarely sudden. It is usually preceded by long periods of moral erosion. Small compromises, small injustices, small acts of deception, stacked quietly, until one day the structure can no longer hold. He also observes that corruption at the top legitimizes corruption at the bottom. When people watch rulers enrich themselves unjustly, they feel justified cheating neighbors. When institutions act dishonestly, individuals feel foolish being ethical. The moral ceiling collapses, and once that happens, laws alone cannot save the system, because people obey laws only when they believe the system is fair. This leads to one of his most important conclusions. A society can endure material hardship. It can survive droughts. It can survive wars. It can survive limited resources. But it cannot survive widespread corruption, because corruption attacks trust, and trust is the invisible infrastructure behind every economy. You can build roads. You can mint coins. You can pass regulations. But without trust, none of it functions properly. This is why Al-Ghazali insists that money is not merely economic, it is ethical. It reflects who we are, what we tolerate, what we reward, what we excuse. From an Islamic lens, this ties directly into accountability. Wealth is a test, not proof of worth, not evidence of virtue, not a scoreboard of superiority. A test: how was it earned? How is it used? Who benefits? Who is harmed? He repeatedly emphasizes that wealth without responsibility is incomplete, not forbidden by default, but dangerous when detached from conscience. Before we continue, I'm curious. Do you think modern society talks enough about ethics when discussing money? Or is everything framed only in terms of profit and growth? Let me know in the comments. And if you find this perspective valuable, consider liking the video so more people see it. Because these ideas don't belong to the past. They belong to the present. And what we do with them may shape the future. Al-Ghazali's world and our world look different on the surface. But beneath the technology, beneath the screens, beneath the algorithms, human nature has not changed. Fear still drives hoarding. Greed still fuels speculation. Shortcuts still tempt people. power still corrupts, and trust still holds everything together. Imagine standing on a bridge at night, watching a massive river move silently beneath your feet. You don't hear crashes, you don't see explosions, but you know the current is powerful, and if the foundations beneath the bridge weaken slowly enough, no one notices, until one day the structure gives way. This is how Al-Ghazali understood civilizations. They rarely collapse because of one dramatic moment. They collapse because of long-term erosion of integrity, tiny cracks, ignored warnings, normalized compromises, and by the time people realize something is wrong, the damage is already deep, in his view. Economic systems are not just collections of rules and institutions, they are reflections of the moral state of the people who operate them. If honesty is rare, markets become predatory. If responsibility is weak, wealth concentrates destructively. If conscience is absent, even sophisticated systems turn fragile. That's why Al-Ghazali never treated financial reform as separate from character reform. You cannot fix one without addressing the other. This idea feels uncomfortable today because modern culture prefers technical solutions, better algorithms, smarter regulations, more complex models. But Al-Ghazali would argue that no amount of complexity can compensate for broken incentives. If a system consistently rewards manipulation, people will manipulate. If it rewards short-term gain over long-term contribution, people will chase short-term gain, not because they are monsters, but because humans respond to incentives. And this is where his thinking becomes deeply relevant to our era. We live in a world of astonishing financial speed. Money moves across continents in milliseconds. Trades happen automatically. Markets operate 24 hours a day. Yet at the same time, public trust in financial institutions, corporations, and governments has been declining in many countries according to various public surveys. People sense that something feels off. They may not articulate it in philosophical language, but they feel it in rising anxiety. They feel it in the cost of living. They feel it in unstable markets. They feel it when hard work doesn't seem to guarantee security anymore. Al-Ghazali would not be surprised. He would likely say that when the link between effort and reward weakens, social stability weakens. When people believe the game is rigged, they disengage. They stop caring about the long-term health of the system. They focus on survival, and survival mode is not fertile ground for ethical behavior. Another idea Al-Ghazali emphasizes is moderation, not stagnation, not poverty, but balance. He warns against both extremes, extreme attachment to wealth and extreme rejection of material life. Why? Because both distort judgment. Someone obsessed with wealth may justify harming others. Someone who rejects material reality entirely may ignore real-world responsibilities. Healthy societies, in his view, cultivate a middle path. People seek provision. They work, they trade, they improve their conditions. But they remember that wealth is a means, not a definition of worth. That single distinction quietly reshapes everything. Because once wealth stops being a measure of who you are, it becomes what it was always supposed to be, a tool for living responsibly. Al-Ghazali believed that when a society forgets this, it begins to suffer from a kind of collective delusion. People start assuming that more money automatically means more success, that those with the largest fortunes must be the most intelligent, that rising prices mean progress, that endless consumption means happiness. None of these assumptions, in his view, are inherently true. They are stories societies tell themselves, and stories shape behavior. If the dominant story says that the purpose of life is accumulation, people will accumulate. If the dominant story says that cutting corners is normal, people will cut corners. If the dominant story says that morality is optional, morality will become rare. This is why Al-Ghazali spent so much of his intellectual energy talking about inner reform, not as an abstract spiritual exercise, but as an economic necessity. He understood that laws can restrain behavior, but only conscience can guide it. A person who avoids cheating only because they fear punishment will cheat the moment they believe they won't be caught. A person who avoids cheating because they believe it is wrong will restrain themselves even when no one is watching. Multiply that difference across millions of people, and you get two very different civilizations. One that barely holds together through surveillance and coercion, and one that functions through shared ethical standards. Al-Ghazali argued that the second type is always more stable. Not perfect, not free of problems, but resilient, because trust reduces friction. When people trust one another, transactions are simpler, contracts are shorter, security costs are lower, disputes are fewer, energy is spent building instead of defending. Modern economists sometimes describe this in technical language: lower transaction costs, higher social capital, institutional credibility. But Al-Ghazali described it in moral language: honesty creates ease, dishonesty creates drag. Over time, drag slows everything. He also warned about something that feels painfully modern: the danger of confusing growth with health. An economy can grow while becoming more fragile. Asset prices can rise while social cohesion falls. Consumption can increase while meaning declines. From the outside, charts look positive. Inside, stress is accumulating. He would likely look at massive debt levels, speculative bubbles, and widening inequality and ask a simple question. Is this prosperity rooted in real productivity and contribution? Or is it inflated by leverage, illusion, and extraction? Because the source of wealth matters. Wealth created by solving real problems tends to be sustainable. Wealth created by shifting paper claims and exploiting imbalances tends to be unstable. Again, this is not an argument against markets. It is an argument for honest markets. There is an important Islamic dimension here. Islamic economic ethics place strong emphasis on fairness, transparency, and real economic activity. Wealth should be tied to risk, sharing, and productive effort, not guaranteed returns detached from real outcomes. This is why riba, interest-based exploitation, is prohibited in Islam, not because profit is forbidden, but because profit should be linked to shared risk and value creation, not extraction from someone's vulnerability. When discussing historical systems that used interest, we do so for educational context only, and from an Islamic lens. Such practices are avoided. Al-Ghazali's worldview aligns closely with this principle. He believed money should serve real trade, real work, real benefit, not become a machine for generating claims on other people's labor without participation. He also placed heavy emphasis on intention. Two people can perform the same external action and be morally different. One may trade to provide for family and contribute to society. Another may trade purely to dominate others, outwardly identical, inwardly opposite. Why does this matter economically? Because intention shapes long-term behavior. Someone driven only by domination will eventually justify harmful tactics. Someone driven by responsibility will seek sustainability. This difference compounds over time. Small ethical choices, repeated thousands of times, become culture. Culture becomes system. System becomes destiny. Al-Ghazali also recognized the psychological toll of constant comparison. When societies elevate wealth as the primary status marker, people begin measuring themselves obsessively. Who has more? Who drives better cars? Who lives in bigger houses? Who appears more successful? This endless comparison produces envy. Envy produces resentment. Resentment erodes social bonds. Instead of seeing neighbors as fellow travelers, people start seeing them as competitors. A society full of competitors but lacking solidarity becomes brittle. People stop caring about collective outcomes. They focus only on personal advantage. From an Islamic ethical perspective, this is dangerous, because Islam emphasizes community mutual support and responsibility toward others, not blind collectivism, but balanced individualism. You strive, you work, you improve, and you remain aware that your success is not isolated from the well-being of those around you. Al-Ghazali feared that when societies forget this balance, they produce both extreme wealth and extreme despair, and extremes breed instability. Another area where his thinking feels relevant is leadership. He did not believe rulers had to be perfect, but he believed they had to be just. Justice, in his definition, is not merely enforcing laws. It is applying rules fairly, protecting the vulnerable, resisting personal enrichment at public expense, creating conditions where honest work is rewarded. When leaders fail at this, Al-Ghazali argued, they don't just harm their own reputation, they harm the moral tone of the entire society. Because leadership behavior becomes imitation behavior. People copy what they see rewarded at the top. If corruption appears profitable and unpunished, it spreads. If integrity appears costly and unrewarded, it disappears. This is not cynicism, it is observation, and it explains why institutional trust is so fragile. Once lost, it is extremely difficult to rebuild, because trust is built slowly and destroyed quickly. Al-Ghazali believed that one of the greatest dangers to any society is normalizing small injustices, not massive crimes. Small ones, the slightly dishonest advertisement, the quietly rigged contract, the everyone does it fee, the tiny manipulation that no one challenges. These accumulate, like sand piling up grain by grain, until movement becomes impossible. From his perspective, the health of an economy can be assessed by everyday behavior. Do people expect honesty? Or do they expect to be cheated? Do merchants feel shame when caught lying? Or do they laugh it off? Do institutions correct mistakes, or hide them? These signals tell you more than GDP numbers ever will. So what does all of this mean for us, as individuals living inside complex modern systems we do not control? Al-Ghazali was realistic. He did not expect individuals to single-handedly fix civilizations, but he believed personal behavior still matters, because systems are made of people, and culture is shaped by repeated actions. From an Islamic ethical standpoint, this begins with intention and restraint, earning through halal means, avoiding exploitation, refusing to profit from others' suffering, being honest even when dishonesty is easier. These choices may feel small, but they are not insignificant. They shape who you become. They shape what you normalize. They shape what you pass on to your children. Another practical lesson is humility. Al-Ghazali warned against assuming immunity. Wealth does not make you safe. Status does not make you safe. Intelligence does not make you safe. Many civilizations before ours believed they were advanced beyond collapse. History disagrees. So a wise posture is not panic and not arrogance. It is cautious realism. Build skills, maintain savings ethically, avoid excessive debt, diversify responsibly, live below your means when possible, support your community, invest in real value creation rather than pure speculation, and perhaps most importantly, cultivate inner stability. Because external systems fluctuate, markets rise and fall, currencies strengthen and weaken, but character remains. From an Islamic adab perspective, this also means remembering accountability. Not just legal accountability, but ultimate accountability before Allah. This belief restrains behavior even when no human consequences exist, and that restraint, multiplied across millions of people, creates something powerful, a moral floor beneath society. Al-Ghazali's message is not pessimistic, it is demanding. He is not saying collapse is guaranteed. He is saying outcomes are shaped by choices, repeated, collective. Over time, civilizations rise when people value justice. They weaken when people excuse injustice. Economies flourish when trust is protected. They fracture when trust is sold for short-term gain. Money can be a means of cooperation or a weapon of exploitation. The difference is not the metal, not the paper, not the code. The difference is the human heart. If there is one central lesson to take from Al-Ghazali, it is this. You cannot build a healthy economy on a sick moral foundation. No amount of technology can substitute for integrity. No financial innovation can replace trust. No policy can permanently compensate for widespread dishonesty. Understanding this does not require becoming a philosopher. It requires paying attention to history, to behavior, to incentives, to yourself, because every transaction you participate in is a tiny vote for the kind of world you want to live in. So choose carefully. Choose honesty over shortcuts. Choose contribution over extraction. Choose responsibility over recklessness. And remember that wealth, in the Islamic understanding, is not proof of superiority. It is a trust. How you handle it matters more than you've been taught. If this series gave you a new way of thinking about money, history, and ethics, consider subscribing.